So the purpose of today really is to launch the project here in the UK. I've been awarded some funding financially through the Enterprise Project launch to launch the project in the UK, and also the International Impact Fund to launch the project in Ireland. So thank you very much for everybody for attending today. This is the official launch of the project. So what I'm trying to do is effectively consider a risk assessment approach to child influencer labour. So looking at child influencer behaviour online in relation to social media. The origins of this project, as most people in the room would know, I'm actually a property lawyer. So in terms of stumbling into this area of research, I was thinking about this area as a space within which people are working. So thinking about it as a normal workspace. And the NSPCC conducted this petition in relation to talking about child influencers and child online digital safety in relation to talking about a Wild West Web. So Andy Burrows, who was then the Child Protection Officer at the NSPCC, referred to the Wild West Web facing children online. So talking about the failure of social media networks and platforms to protect children in what he referred to as this Wild West Web. So this indicated to me some sort of flawless space where the space wasn't operating in the same way as we would find in real workspaces. I'm interested in appearance discrimination, so I was thinking about places where people's appearance mattered. So in looking at people's appearance online, I was thinking about aesthetic labour, so places where people's appearance mattered in relation to their working lives. Further there.
It's clearer online if you're a little bit closer.
Okay, sorry. So thinking about this, I'll have to move that as well. Sorry, technical issues everywhere today. It's okay, no, it's fine. I won't do this with you. Next slide, please. So thinking about this space in relation to people whose appearance mattered, I found quite a lot of children within that space. So that led me to see an amount of child influencer labour, so seeing children at work within this space. But obviously the first visible platform restriction you see on a social media platform like Instagram is that children under 13 shouldn't have their own accounts. So this would conflict with the numerous baby and children accounts that we see on there. We are used to seeing children being performing, modelling, acting, singing, whatever within this space, and advertising brands as well. So the appearance of children online conflicts with this under 13 restriction. So what I'm talking about here is the escalation not just of people sharing pictures of their children and or children playing and that being filmed or photographed. I'm talking about this translating into a form of child labour, where the brands or the experiences are promoting their activities and their products through the payment for the child's performance. So this translates the normal kind of taking a picture of your cute child or your cute puppy and turning it into something that translates into economic activities. Within the research, myself have found 4 specific categories of people who are behaving in this way in the online sphere, so people whose children are performing in this area. Some have stories to share, so some are sharing stories in relation to important journeys that they've been on with their children, such as if the child has SEN needs, if the child has been delivered through different means, such as through surrogacy journey, if the parents are same gender, etc., they may have a story that they want to share that highlights or raises attention to that specific issue. We then have what I've referred to as momfluencers, not in a demeaning way, but what was a mummy blogger, now becoming mothers who are aware of the kind of captive audience of this and are introducing children into that economy as well. The category called Insta-fame are the people who have become famous themselves through some sort of social media presence or profile. That's usually off the back of something like Love Island or Love is Blind or whatever, where they achieve a status of fame through that activity and then become Insta-famous in their own right. We see that those people are now having children, having babies, and introducing children into this life as standard because that's been their experience. And then the fourth category that we see in terms of child labour online would be #FuturePro. So those are parents who are trying to promote the career of their child in terms of thinking about their child as the next potential Tiger Woods or Serena Williams. So they're trying to enhance the profile of the child from a young age into their future career. So there's a number of reasons why parents are doing this, and I'm reluctant to kind of take the moniker of exploitation or bad behaviour. There are a number of reasons why parents feel that this is an appropriate journey for them to go on, and their child is part of that journey. As well as that, especially with things like the sporting side, we see this encouraged and endorsed socially and socially propped up as acceptable behaviour. In terms of sporting teams and clubs expecting parents to have social media accounts and for their children to have profiles in that way. So in terms of thinking about it as a form of labour, we're thinking about the child's performance. So I compare that to child actors or child models. So situations where children are performing in a way that demands certain behaviours from them. It usually looks like the child is being scripted, propped, so they're being dressed a certain way, they're being positioned a certain way, they have to say certain lines, usually some sort of directive within deadlines. So this has to happen on a certain day to hit a certain moment, or it has to be done to time schedule. And again, economic effects, but the difficulty with this in terms of legislation has been hard to translate the economic effect where there's no payment of money, where the activity instead is exchanged for brands, goods, or experiences. It can be very difficult to find a financial trail, and that's one of the issues we found in looking at this in France, where there has been regulation in this area, in finding that financial trail. The French have been a little bit more creative in thinking about any type of economic gain, including the brand experience. So thinking about what qualifies as performance time, and trying to legislate for this in California, they looked at an equivalence with reality TV, which would be the only kind of thing that we've got that bears a resemblance really in terms of other types of performance. So we're not talking about Daniel Radcliffe playing Harry Potter here, we're talking about a real child whose real attributes and qualities are the things that increase their influence. So in thinking about what their performance time might be, the comparison could be with reality TV stars, where children have had cameras exposed within their homes for periods of time, and reality TV has become more normalized with child content in it. In that area, the children would be seen as working any time that the camera is on and they're not on a dedicated rest break. So whether it becomes content, whether it's something that's been directed or staged, it doesn't really matter. As long as the cameras are rolling and the child's not sitting somewhere elsewhere without cameras on, they're considered to be performers. So what this does is, and I know I've got one of the experts in the room in relation to a grey zone of platform economy labour. So if you're thinking about people who have chosen to do this as influencers with their own free agency and choice, it still puts them into a precarious position because they aren't true employees. They become contractors and they become self-employed within a very complex network of the platform, who they're hosting, who they're hosted by, the brands and agencies that they're involved with, and their end user, consumer or viewer. So this complex network becomes even more complicated when we're thinking about children within this space, because the child has got a parent who is ultimately taking responsibility for that complexity, and the child should be shielded, or there should be an umbrella of protection provided for them by their parent, because ultimately it seems to be the parent's choice in terms of placing them in this environment. So, why it matters? Historically and more recently, we're seeing the boom of phrases that relate to this as an economy. So we can see an influencer economy, social media economy, platform economy, attention economy. So it is talked about in a financial way. As we can see on the slide, that translates into money. So the estimated growth on this is exponential. We're seeing a very huge increase in terms of the dollar take on influencer marketing. So projected to be $24 billion this year. That means we're placing children into a very lucrative market where that economy that they're being placed into has expectations akin to a normal workplace. Another reason why it matters is because children and young people are the ones who are predominantly present on social media. It's very much a part of their culture. They're very much growing up with that now as an expected norm. So young people are key consumers in the market as well as users. Over 55% of 6 to 16-year-olds surveyed in the US and UK stated that they would want to purchase a product just because their favorite social media star had done so. So it's persuasive to them in terms of they are the ones there, and they are the ones that are using it and persuaded by it. I knew what to say in Ireland when I did this bit, because I wanted to be John Sheridan in the Irish football squad when I grew up. So I already had an awareness of what celebrity culture was when I was a kid. But here, now, celebrity culture is even bigger than it was when I was a little girl in the 80s in Dublin. And here we see the rise of people who are projecting this lifestyle that's aspirational, and celebrity culture becoming huge, not just for us to purchase things, but for young people to see ways of life that they might not achieve through mainstream media. So they're seeing other types of role models that would have been hidden from them, maybe on mainstream TV growing up. So that self-identity formation, as I said, also results in an opportunity. They see someone they aspire to be like, they want to buy the things that that person has. They want to aspire to that lifestyle. And as parents, the parents want to keep the child happy and also make sure that the child feels that they have the things that they didn't have. But it's not just about you becoming a user or becoming a consumer through this. The prosumer model of influencer culture, the production and consumption reliance, means that children are also aspiring to be this when they grow up. So 30% of 8 to 12-year-olds have picked this as what they want to be when they grow up. So that's their aspiration in terms of a full-time career as an adult. So they want to enter into quite a precarious situation work-wise, and it's the top profession choice above anything that you would think of historically and normatively around doctor, barrister, police person, etc. But as well as that, so they're more likely to purchase, they want to be one when they get older. As well as that, their own content generates more attention. So in an attention economy where everybody's fighting for clicks, their own cute factor means that they're 3 times more likely to achieve that click, like, or share than any other type of content that has a human in it. I haven't put puppies and kittens in there because that's just not fair game. But cute factor for children evidences that there are, 3 times more likely to generate some sort of transaction with the viewer. So that's also why it matters. So these young people are present in a booming economy, looking up to the people that they see on there, more likely to aspire to their lifestyle and buy their things, and to want to be them when they grow up. And they're garnering 3 times more attention than their competition. So that's kind of the background in terms of why it matters and why I ended up sticking with this project that's falls so very far outside my field. And then as a lawyer, oh, crikey, I have these emails. I'm very sorry about that. As a lawyer, but also as a parent, I have wanted to know how this is possible. So how are these young people here? Who's minding them? And who cares? So thinking about regulation in terms of, well, if they were at work, if they were a child model or a child actor, there would be workplace protection. Daniel Radcliffe on the set of Harry Potter and all of the other lovely children that are on the set of Harry Potter had the benefit of on-site tuition, on-site education, working hours, protection, safeguarding for many of the equipment, etc. So that workspace or a child on a photo shoot would look very different to a child who's at home being propped and scripted to produce content online. So in terms of dealing with this through the law and looking at legislation to address it, France have led the way in terms of introducing this as a regulatory issue. I have had the joy, pleasure, and opportunity to have support of some of our French double degree students, some of whom are in the room today, and some of whom are on Zoom. So I'm very grateful for them being here and for their support over the last year. But we had the opportunity as well to talk to Bruno Studet, who was the politician in France who introduced this bill, which became law in April 2021. So the law in France primarily looks at a few areas of this in relation to the financial implications for the child. So ensuring that the children's money that comes from this activity may be placed on a trust and protected in some way so that the child would end up with that at a future date, which is in line, as I say, with things that happen already for child models and child actors on mainstream media. The other French approach was to think about this as a privacy issue. So encouraging parents to have conversations with children about their comfort levels around the content and encouraging the right to remove, so the right of erasure for the content itself. Now, there are a number of other things in terms of obviously the educational side. It draws it in line with child models and child actors. The child has to be reported to the local authority as working in this industry, and their working hours should be monitored and reported on. So we see this law introduced in France. In talking to Bruno Studet about the law very much was influenced by work that had been conducted with charities in France, but also a hope or an ambition to inform and educate parents in this arena and make them a more heightened awareness of their responsibilities towards the children in relation to this behaviour. So I found that quite interesting as a parent myself and thinking about how to talk to other parents who are behaving in this way, that the aim of the legislation itself wasn't punitive. No one's been punished through this method. There is an agency in place to check this, monitor it, but no one has received any retribution as a result of not doing this or performing correctly in relation to this piece of legislation. So the whole gamut of this legislation is to support parents and to inform them more clearly of their rights. The other problem, I guess, as a lawyer looking on the outside in at this piece of legislation is effectively, if we're talking about the self-reporting of the child to the Education Authority, the self-monitoring of the financial aspect, and the conversation with child about privacy and would you like it taken down, that law is putting pressure on parents to behave in a certain way and effectively self-regulate and self-report. It's not putting pressure on any of the platforms or on the brands, other than some of the financial disclosure. But the pressure still and the responsibility is still being placed on parents to think about this and to know what to do, with some support in these key areas that the French system has recognized as being critical for child safeguarding. And now we see similar approaches being introduced in Belgium. So Belgium are introducing the bill currently, and in Illinois, of all places, it has just become law. So we're looking at a state-by-state approach in America. In California, where you would think that they'd be most likely to introduce a law in this area, they've really struggled. And they've struggled for some of the reasons I've already discussed. Financial tracking of the economic incentive and the reportage of it, effectively who's keeping score, who's going to be reporting on these activities. So there are problems even where there would be legislation for this. In the UK, in the Select Committee hearing into influencer culture, they recognised that there was a gap in this area, specifically in the legislation that relates to child employment and child employment for performers in various areas. So it's not in a parity with the child performer legislation under 1963 or the 2014 updates. We have also new legislation that protects children as users through the Online Safety Act and the Digital Services Act also. But those pieces of legislation, as fantastic as they are in terms of tackling child as viewer, don't really look at the child on the other side of the lens in terms of performance. So there's some crossover there, but it doesn't fully tackle the role of child in workplace. It thinks about harm to child as viewer. So they discussed this gap in the Select Committee hearing. They recognised it as a legal lacuna or an area that hadn't been addressed. It was referred to as a legislative grey area and declared to be fundamentally wrong by the chair. However, in the responses, inquiries post-committee, it was determined that the UK have no current plans. They have no plans to change this at this time. So there's been a recognition that it doesn't protect children in the same way as other legislation does. There's an anomaly, there's a grey area. There's a recognition that it's fundamentally wrong, therefore, and it's not protecting children. But we don't have any plans within the UK to address this. So that's partly why I've chosen the UK and Ireland, because we have two jurisdictions where English speaking and aren't legislating for this area, but influencer culture and mother and child influencer culture seems quite strong and dominant in the online arena. As I said, in terms of even introducing a law in this area or places where a law already exists, we have difficulties around enforceability. And also we're always coming up against the butt of parental authority. They're my child, I know what's best. I'll decide what I want to share of them, how I want to share, how often I want to share, and whether there's financial consequences as a result of that sharing. So the position of parental authority in terms of parents already have a lot of choice around what school a child goes to, church, different people in their life, what they'll wear, etc. And this is another facet of that. There's still an area within which parents' choice is fundamental. So that's kind of where we are in terms of thinking about this as a legal area, recognizing areas where there are laws, recognizing that even with laws, there's still a lot of pressure put on parents. And as I'm about to show you, some of the laws are wanting. There are many more harms than are covered by the ones that I've discussed through the French legislation. So in my mind, I think as well as, and supplemental to regulation, we should be having a conversation about education and having conversations with parents who are conducting this behaviour or who are thinking about becoming influencers, raising awareness about the fact that this is creating a pseudo workspace within your own home, and where a child would have a range of other protections in other workspaces that's lacking in this situation. The idea of the framework would be to introduce a best practice approach to this. Even where there is regulation that deals with this, as in France, it's not prohibitive of the practice. It doesn't prevent or even provide harsh judgment for parents who are practicing in this way, who are online with their children, and there's an influencer account active. So this project aims to take a similar approach, to try not to be judgmental about the practice or prohibitive in any way, so that parents will engage with the project and have conversations, and we can start this conversation around what best practice in this area looks like. If you are moving from sharing and sharing information about your child online into this becoming an economic activity that is driven by deadlines and directives and economic incentives, might this create a new form of responsibilities for you as a parent? So Ed McGee came to the select committee hearing. He is one of the enforcement officers in the child employment sector. And his concern when he saw the disparity between protection for children in other areas and this area said, we don't know what they're doing, we don't know how often they're performing, and we don't know the impact it has on them as a child. If they're on a photo shoot or at a movie set, those working hours would be accounted for, and we'd have clear understanding of what this labour looked like and what it meant, and we just don't. Professor Sonia Livingston gives this beautiful example that I like, because I do face criticism that I'm not hard enough on platforms and brands when I talk about this as a parental issue. It's, in my mind, a shared issue. She talks about a situation where whenever roads were developed and cars were developed, we didn't not get in cars or not put our children in cars or not let our children out of the house in case they died on a road. It's taken the combined effort of parents, teachers, car designers, road authorities, and town planners to strike an acceptable balance between children's freedom to navigate their neighbourhood and the attendant risks. Kids are online. Kids under 13 are online. Parents are sharing activities and performances of their kids under 13 online. It's like we put them in the car, they're on the road, but no one's maybe finished designing the road and the car fully yet. So I want to start having those conversations about what that journey looks like. So as Alexandra knows, we've got children working in this area which is rapidly professionalising. We're seeing other people feeding from that 24 billion economy, other types of people stemming from that. We're seeing influencer agencies, we're seeing influencer camps where children can go to learn how to be better influencers on their holidays from school. So we see a rapidly professionalising space, as I've said. They then are increasingly pushed into this more complex framework where the parent is having to act as a shield or an umbrella to all these other big parties. I mean, I wouldn't, as a parent, know how to contract with Lidl or Primark or Adidas, heaven forbid. Like, I just wouldn't know how to do it. And I'm a lawyer. So I just feel like it's a very complex space to be putting yourself into. As I said, that creates an opportunity for other stakeholders to get on board and for them to make money as well. And it feels sometimes like the micro influencers or the low level influencers are so far down the food chain of this booming economy where they are meant to be the focus and the goal. And it's all reliant, as I've already said, on the child's performance. The child themselves are securing the likes, shares, and clicks. Their cute factor is generating the attention, and therefore this workspace is hinging around the behaviours and performances of the child, creating this extra level of parents, if it is a workspace, for them to risk assess the same way as you would as any employer. So yeah, as I say, in terms of thinking about this in Andy Burroughs' framework of Wild West Web, I feel like this is an area that's unregulated for currently in this jurisdiction, and even in terms of guidelines, we would struggle as parents. It gets me because they say there's no book on parenting, but if you go to the library, there are tons of books on parenting, and there's a degree on childhood and education, but there literally is no book on this. So, I'm hoping that we can develop a conversation around what this looks like and how to better manage it. In terms of Ireland, I'll just put up the statistics. So Ireland, the kids are spending 2 to 3 hours of their day online, which I'd say would be fairly equivalent here. It ranks quite low in terms of European digital civility, and it's a global hotspot for behavioural risk. So that's part and parcel of why Ireland's a partner to this, not just because I'm from there, I promise. And like here, parents are struggling with knowing how to support their children in these environments. They're not sure. This has become the new normal. This has become socially acceptable, and parents are asking for help. Let me skip this one. So the project itself, in terms of what I'm hoping to address, is to look at 6 critical areas of harm. I've explained the areas of harm legislated for through the French provision already, but these areas of harm are much deeper and much broader. So what I've done is I've created a survey that I'm hoping to share and disseminate with parents in this area. I'm very mindful that of all the people who turned up to the select committee hearing on influencer culture, no parents would attend. So I'm very aware of the fact that I'm talking to people who might feel judged and might feel there's a finger pointing at them. So all of this is being written in a way where I won't be identifying any children on these slides. I won't be identifying any parents on these slides. I am trying not to use any, I get a last for it by the media. I've ended up in this media thing over the last week, and everybody wants me to talk about a family or an example. And I just don't feel comfortable doing that. That's not my place. And the New York Times piece recently talked about a picture of a 9-year-old who was wearing something skimpy, but they didn't show the photo of the 9-year-old. They just said what it was, and then showed the comments underneath the picture of that little girl. And I want to try and encourage us to be thinking that way, that I'm not here to titillate or make everybody salivate about the terrible things parents are doing to their kids and to give you examples and pictures. I'm trying to encourage a conversation about this without finger pointing or, producing any spectacle around specific children or parents' practices in this area. So I want to engage with parents. I'm trying to send this out to people for them to click on and get engaged with and ask questions of themselves. So that's all this survey does. It breaks down these areas of harm that I have researched as potential harms, and it asks them to think about whether they think about them as harms. So in each of those areas, I've asked, do you think that this is a harmful issue? Do you recognise this as an issue at all? And then if you have recognised this as an issue, what are you doing with your own child influencer practice or within your own family to address this, so that I can see what that best practice looks like? We pick up a bottle of bleach and we've got all the horrible things that could happen to us on the back of the bleach. None of us are probably going to drink the bleach or throw it in our eyes, but we know what to do or what happens if that accident occurs. And this is the awful thing that could happen. Have you thought about the awful thing? Are you seeing any of this? And what should be the directions on the back of the bottle of bleach for this? So that's what we're trying to develop. So the first area would be financial harms. The French law looks at this as a privacy issue and talks about compensation rather than earnings as a way to avoid the kind of tracking of money due to this behaviour. It thinks about a form of compensation instead for the invasion of privacy. So the first question is, should the potential invasion of the child's privacy be financially compensated for? The second question then talks about where there would be a money trail. Where there is some financial gain resulting from the child's performance, should they be paid and or the money be kept safe for their future? Because currently there's no compulsion for parents to behave in this way. They don't have to protect the money for the child the same way as they would if the child was a model or active. I talked already about my inability to negotiate with Lidl, Primark or Adidas, but yes, if parents are conducting complex commercial negotiations with brands and agencies, could the child be disadvantaged due to the parents' lack of knowledge in this area? The next one's huge in terms of child safety online more generally, but obviously in this situation, we're talking about mass volume data sharing. So where the child's personal data is shared in volume, could this provide identity thieves or fraudsters with the information to steal or hack the child's identity? And finally, as the child becomes used to expensive items and experiences, could this create material expectations that may be difficult to keep up with long term? So if the child is used to wearing the Gucci trainers and going on the beautiful, what's the word I'm looking for, Seychelles vacation, then does that set up a standard of an expectation or a norm, which might educationally, as we'll see, be difficult to fulfill if this child's school attendance and attainment has suffered? So the next area of education would be, could the performance commitments of the child have negative impacts on the child's school attendance? Could the performance commitments of the child also negatively impact the child's academic performance in school? And could this mean that the requirement for regular content might negatively impact on the longer term academic prospects of the child? So thinking about not just, are they going to school now, are they doing well in school, but what do they think of education? Do they think about going to university, or are they thinking that this is a career that they can get rich quick in now and that money will sustain them? The next one's about kind of basic health and safety. So I'm asking questions like, and you would have a normal employer. Have you trained your employee? What are they using in terms of equipment? What hours are they working? Are they insured? Because if a home is a workplace, there should be some sort of insurance, but most home insurance would be invalid if you're working. So it's that, like, just making people think, oh, I hadn't thought about that. If they haven't thought about that, that's fine. If they have and they've put something in place, that's what we're looking for in terms of information. So thinking about the equipment that they're using, any props, activities that they're doing, anything that could be dangerous or anything that could be harmful to the child in a normal health and safety environment. These ones, again, this is just coming from research that I've conducted. So what happens where you've got one of your children who becomes a main breadwinner? We're seeing these articles in the media, again, these kind of clickbait stuff of, oh, why isn't your toddler paying your mortgage? You know, this expectation suddenly that a child becomes a key contributor to the family income. So does the financial pressure to perform disrupt the role of the child within the family, placing the pressure of wage earner on their shoulders? Is it? How do you, because some parents have given up work as a result of this activity. Could this expectation of financial reward lead parents to push or coerce the child to perform? It's about as kind of judgmental as I get in relation to this, but thinking whether if you're reliant on that income, you're going to encourage your child. I know how difficult it is to get a child dressed looking right, clean, and where she needs to be normally. Never mind, she's got to be wearing this, she's got to say this, she's got to not get it dirty. There's only one of them. It's a very different type of scenario. So thinking of them as a child versus thinking of them as a performer. Does the child get to be a child within a family, or do they suddenly have this other identity? I'm sure when Harry Potter went home, he could just be Daniel or Dan. He didn't have to always be this character or this persona, or hang on, I'll get a camera out and film you doing that cool thing. So does the child actually get to be a child? And then the other one are about other people in the family unit. If you've got one child who's more successful than the other, can that cause sibling rivalry? We see situations where parents don't agree, grandparents don't agree with the parents behaving this way, and we see situations where parents don't agree with each other in this way. We've even had a situation where a father has come to another country and taken his child to somewhere where he felt she wouldn't be exposed to the pressure to be an influencer. So it can lead to some sort of family disruption in some of the more extreme, again, like the bleach scenario, in some of the more extreme situations, that's what has been found. I won't go through each of the questions in this, but obviously in terms of thinking about how do the performance hours impact upon the child's privacy, like I said about, taking the camera out for all of these moments. If the child has a problem with it, can they ask for it to be removed? What happens when they're hearing all of these opinions from the outside world that they might not normally hear? Could that impact on their self-esteem? Can they express their own views and identities and opinions, or do they have to stay on brand? What happens if they don't like the thing or don't use the thing? Do they have to go along with this? And could it expose them to either real-world bullying from people in their schools and environments at home, or obviously in an online setting? And where any of this is happening, same as normal workplace situation, are there ways to recognise the child's need for support where the performances are resulting in negative impacts on their mental health? So is there something in place that you're having these critical conversations with your child and making sure that you're checking in and seeing how they're doing and giving support otherwise? Last one, it's a bit long, but it's the biggest in terms of the dignity of the child and some of the behaviours. We're dealing with an attention economy where you're trying to exacerbate attention or get clicks, likes, shares, attention from people. So some of these behaviours can be quite extreme in adults, and then we're encouraging it in young people as well. So does the child have to fit into an identifiable brand that might negatively impact on their reputation? So is there something within the brand itself that might have negative connotations or not be age appropriate? We're seeing this thing about face creams at the minute. 10-year-olds are promoting face creams. Like, that's not age appropriate. I know it's not like smoking or getting a tattoo, but it's like anti-aging face cream at 10. So, like, what's that doing to the reputation of the child? I'm thinking about those sorts of behaviours. Is the child encouraged to engage in attention-grabbing activities such as swearing, smoking, crying, or having tantrums? We're hearing parents say they're taking kids to doctors and dentists, and their children who are usually quite rational and measured in these situations are playing up because they've seen somebody on social media had faint at the dentist or get excited, overexcited and anxious at the doctors, because again, that's a performance. It's not reality. It's there on social media to engage us. So thinking about behaviours that might not be appropriate, thinking about hoaxing and pranking, so either telling them something that's untrue to get an emotional response or playing a trick on them to get an emotional response or reaction. So we're having children told their puppy has died or their Xbox is broken, just to see the child be upset and have reaction to it. So thinking about those things that might seem funny, but in the context of managing expectations and behaviours there. Sexualization, we're seeing children posing for brands where if I walk down the high street, I would not see a child on a billboard in a leotard with their bum in the air, or a swimsuit with their bum in the air. But to judge the stretchiness of leotards or swimsuits, we're seeing branded content with young children that may not be fully appropriate. And as the New York Times established, when you look at the comments on some of that content, it's quite obvious what the issue might be. So is the child posed or dressed in ways that might somehow sexualize them? And then the fact that this child is real, me and my colleague call it not the Milky Bar kid, or not the fairy liquid baby. You know, we've all grown up with these imageries of children who've advertised us things or are on movies. But here we have a real child doing real things in their real home. So does the fact that the child is real and not acting a part place them in greater danger of physical harm due to, because the child is relatively accessible, so thinking about stalking, for example, or place them in greater danger of online grooming because they're relatively accessible in the digital arena as well. So those are the questions I'm asking parents. I'm hoping to engage with them in a way where they can talk to me about whether they even thought about some of these things before, whether they think I'm screaming at the wind like a lady who's wringing her hands with concern that everybody's going to throw bleach in their eyes. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to engage with people in a practical way for them to think about whether this exists and if they have encountered it with their own children, within their own family, how they're dealing with it. So the bottom web address is the project page for both Ireland and the UK, but the web link there, I was told a QR code might be difficult. So a web link there, especially for the people on Zoom, is so that you can go straight to the survey and fill it in. So the idea is that that survey will be shared with key people who are working in this area so that they can engage with me and tell me whether I'm on the right track or not. So that's kind of all I have to say. The rest of it's mostly kind of questions and cake, really. But I just wanted to thank everybody. I'm very thankful. There's a lot of people online, and it's impressive to see some fantastic colleagues and supporters online. I wanted to thank Essex University for giving me money. Money is always nice. So I've had some International Impact Fund to go to Ireland, and this part of the project is the Enterprise Project Fund. My Essex Law School colleagues and peers have been incredibly supportive and given me great advice and feedback along the way, and the events team have been incredible about supporting me and getting things out there over the last week or so. My French research team, some of whom are here, some of whom are on Zoom, volunteered their time for me. There wasn't any monetary gain for them in doing so, but they just did it of their own volition and were incredibly helpful. And my research assistant, who cannot be here today, she's not very well, Ikra, has also been incredibly valuable in terms of helping me create the actual survey. She's been a whiz with the tech and also creating both events. So thank you very much.